What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bronx Attorney Broadcast. In this episode, I speak with Josh Gittleman. Josh was actually in my study group at St. John's, so we've known each other for quite some time now. Josh is a partner at Toffel and Gittleman. He practices personal injury law, but also has a substantial employment law practice. In this episode, we talk about what it's like to change systems and processes and make partner at a small law firm. Enjoy. What's up, Josh? Thanks for taking some time out of your day to talk to me.
Hey, Will, thanks for having me on the pod. I love your setup. You got the mic going and everything.
Yeah, thank you. Just by means of introduction, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Where you come from? Where'd you go to school? Whatever you think's relevant.
Absolutely. So I'll start a little bit at the top first. As you could probably guess, I'm an attorney, St. John's here with Will. But if we're going to rewind just a bit more than that, I'm a Long Island guy. I'm sure plenty of people listening are sick of us as it is. There's plenty of us running around here. So nothing too crazy about that. Suffolk County guy. There is some differences between the city and out there. You know, it's not necessarily the sticks, but it was some childhood. I was just in Suffolk not that long ago, and I guess I didn't know there's 1,000 differences between the Suffolk County courts and the city courts, like little things like that, right? And so one of the attorneys there, I guess I didn't know one of their really local rules. He called me a 212 attorney. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but he threw that as an insult right away. So Long Island from the top, and then after Long Island, I went to Buffalo. So stayed in New York the whole time, finance and marketing background in Buffalo, and eventually transferred or changed to, a law career with St. John's. All 3 years there, not too much complaining. You'd say there's pretty good guys out there from St. John's, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, non-biased reaction for sure.
So this guy that called you a 212 attorney, was he trying to insult you as being too city?
Yeah, that's what I think it was. So, out there they pick their jury a slightly different way with the cards and everything like that. And so I was doing it the way that, you do it in Kingsmore. And so he was like, he was a nice guy, but he was teasing me about it because I was like, all right, let's go, talk to the judge. And he was like, no, we just don't do it here that way. And he was right, but I just, the little rule is there. So he called me a 212 guy.
That's pretty funny. So what brought you to St. John's Law School and what was your experience like there?
St. John's was great. I mean, the same kind of stuff that is not so great about any law school, not so great about St. John's, it's doing the work.
Right.
But overall, high quality people, I would say, and I think you'd probably agree that Queens has a little bit about it where it tends to be down to earth people compared to maybe some other schools. So, I was up in Buffalo, which probably was pretty down to earth for undergrad, but St. John's just had the right vibe. At least I felt that way.
Yeah, it wasn't as cutthroat as some people say law school is. So that was
besides
nice.
Maybe one or two professors that who will remain unnamed.
Yeah, that were a little tough, right?
Yeah, a little bit of a PTSD from that, but we don't got to go into that.
So did you have any experience in law prior to St. John's, or was that your first legal experience?
So I did, and almost doing somewhat similar stuff. So when I was in undergrad, I kind of worked as a legal secretary or paralegal at a defense firm for, personal injury, slip and falls. One of their larger clients was, it was either Stop and Shop or ShopRite, one of those big supermarkets on Long Island. So a flavor of what I do now, it was defense side, which is very different in many ways. And I think that, similar for you, I got the feeling for a lot of defense stuff, and I wouldn't say it pushed me to the plaintiff stuff, but it definitely, got me thinking about what the other side is like.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely pushed me. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this.
Right. Yeah. There's plenty of stuff that I was like, oh, is this really the structure that I want to be a part of? And people have different opinions, but I feel like there's a lot more freedom on our side, and you could build a little more.
Yeah, it helps to work for the good guys too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Instead of
Yeah, yeah.
being a stormtrooper in Darth Vader's army.
I like to think. I haven't thought about it that way, but I do like to think of it that way. That's good. Right up my alley.
And then, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Sure, sure. So, like I said, it was, especially when I first came to the field, all tend to be like personal injury or medical malpractice. And after moving to my current firm, I've been here for 3 or 4 years now. At least half the practice, probably more, is employment discrimination.
Mm-hmm. And what's your role there?
So I'm a partner there. Didn't start out that way, but I'm a partner there. And a lot of these cases, there's a wide range of them. You know, they're wage and hour cases, so people who are underpaid, whether it be overtime, not getting paid at all, some labor law violations. And then on the flip side of that, there's a lot of employment discrimination cases, which can be a bit of a hot topic, as I think you're aware as well.
Right. So did you always know that you wanted to have an ownership interest in a law firm, or was that something that came about later on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of things. So when I first got to the firm I'm currently at, which is Toffel and Gittleman and Josh Gittleman, so I was still new to the field, and the way the firm was set up, it was on the smaller side. I believe it was, another two attorneys, the head guy, and me. And now it's just me, another attorney, and we're probably hiring another guy soon. And we have a paralegal and maybe another paralegal who's in and out.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the small firm, everything you do matters more. So I kind of got the feel, which I didn't have in a defense side firm, and I didn't have in a larger firm, that the more I do, the more I get good at what I'm doing, and the more I can spend my time well in the firm, the more of a difference I made. And so, I became a key piece in that firm. And so I'm thinking to myself, how can I get more of a feeling like that? Making a difference. And, yes, it's making a difference in my clients' lives, but it's also making a difference in what the firm looks like and the outcomes. Because it's hard in a bigger firm to see what your ripples are, your waves. Who knows? And so I guess that's kind of how it developed. I was like, okay, so what would be the next step if I'm pushing cases, if I'm settling cases, I'm learning, I'm allowing the firm to grow? How can I get more of that feeling? I think that's kind of where it came from.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like that's in developing systems and processes, or from having, your hand in a little bit more of every different aspect of the firm?
I think it's in both, and you'll have to tell me if you get this same vibe, because
mm-hmm.
when I see something that doesn't work the way it should, whether it's just like an outdated process, doesn't take advantage of the technology we have,
right?
It doesn't streamline things. I can't help it but not try to fix it. You get that same kind of. Yeah, so that's what it comes down to. I want to fix things because, one, it makes my life easier. Two, it makes everyone else's in the firm easier. And when I can see that actually playing out, that's a big thing. Just to think of an example, when we do client intakes, right? Mm-hmm. And we might touch on this before for the employment cases,
right?
And I don't know if I want to get too much into it now, but a big issue is that there's a huge discrepancy in what the law is and what the general public thinks the law is, what the protections are, and what the general public thinks the protection are when it comes to employment and working. Mm. And sometimes that's because of the way that, certain attorneys advertise certain words that are both legal terms, but then also widely used in a non-legal way.
Right.
And so an example of a streamlined process is having a document ready that, in the plainest English you could possibly think of, explains the law. So you have someone calling, they want to be signed up, and you don't want to give a lecture every time someone calls. You don't want to explain the very broad concepts because
Right.
unless they have a decent understanding of law, it's really hard to shift through the facts to see if they have a case or not. They have to be doing some of the heavy lifting. You can't ask them everything about their life and then make a case. They got to know what you're looking for.
Right.
And so creating a document that explains in plainest of English what you're looking for is kind of one of those processes where I just couldn't help but help myself and help the firm.
Yeah, and I know that we've discussed a lot about how the average person doesn't really understand what discrimination is, and a lot of times confuses, people who are just mean to them for discrimination. And it's something funny that I saw recently was, somebody explained it for as in, can my boss fire me for having mustard on my shirt? And it's like, yeah, it's if that really upsets your boss, they could fire you for that.
Right. It's one of a million different things they can fire you for, and there's like a category of 25 things they can't.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so do you feel like developing this, step in the process has helped you make your life easier?
It's made my life easier. It's made the other attorney's life easier, and I think sometimes it brings in business because you help out someone, even if they don't get signed up for a client, signed up as a client. You help out someone by explaining to them the law, and most of the time they come to their own conclusion about whether or not they have a case, and they're happy that they helped it all. You helped it all, and then they go to their friends, and now they have an understanding of the law that their friends don't have, and people love to share things that they know because people like to pass along the knowledge. And all of a sudden they're saying, okay, I didn't have a case, but my friend here is in the exact situation that was explained in your memo and that you went over with me. And so all of a sudden you're hearing from from two degrees of different people, you're hearing from someone who has a case. So it works on a bunch of different levels there. You almost give, and you don't know if you're going to get back. Sometimes you do.
And so you mentioned bringing in business. How have you gone about trying to bring in business, and have you seen any success so far?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of momentum and a lot of building relationships. So I've tried a couple of the advertising routes. As far as if you have the capacity to take a lot of calls and listen to a lot of people, and there's a stage in a firm where you can do that, then a lot of what does work is, and it tends to be hiring an outside firm, just optimizing, the Google search engine results for your law firm website. That helps the law firm as a whole. So, and when I tell you that we went through at the law firm 2 or 3 different marketing firms before we found one that was actually willing to put in the time, we did. I think we went to 3 or 4. The first 2 or 3, and this is search engine optimization. They say they're going to do it, and then you look at the website, you look at like the metadata behind the website. They didn't change anything about it.
Right.
So when you finally find someone who's willing to do it and optimize it, you could look at their Google searches, and if you search Google local, my firm's now like 3 or 4 down the list instead of the 4th page. So it's like the 54th firm there, and a lot of calls actually get generated that way. So those come straight into the firm.
Right.
That's kind of one section. Yeah.
And that's tough because you're competing with some heavy hitters out there that are spending maybe $10,000 a month on social media on the SEO stuff.
Absolutely. Lots of big money there. I think that does help though to be on the Google local end of it, because there's if you search near me, it'll bring up the maps,
right,
as opposed to just trying to get your website to the top of someone searching employment attorney. But still, a huge heavy hitter. So you got to find some marketing firm who's probably willing to put in more time than they should.
And that's so, before you were at your current firm, you were at some other places beforehand. Was being able to go into more of the business side of law, did that play into your decision to move at all, or was it something else?
No, it really didn't. Part of how the business end thing became more of a focus point for me is that there was more, I think, and again, only love for the firm I was at prior. There was a little more room for me to grow because the firm was at its earlier stages, the firm I'm at now. Because I came into the firm, it was already a somewhat established firm, but not to the extent where my first job out of law school, where I spent a couple of years, that was a very established firm. So they were at different times in their life cycle, different times in their life cycle.
So do you enjoy practicing law more, or do you enjoy the business of law more?
I think it's got to be a mix, because too much of either, you start pounding your head against the wall. I think if anything, it's better to kind of move from one to the other, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm not talking about every 5 minutes, but either every day or every couple hours. That's the way you keep it fresh, because if I'm just working on briefs, I'm just working on pushing cases, just doing conferences and arguments and prepping for trials, that's great. But the variety, and I guess give me a larger perspective of what the goal is the business end of things. It allows me to, okay, why am I pushing some of these cases so hard? Where does that get me? It gives me the mile high view that, really helps.
This episode of the Bronx Attorney Broadcast was brought to you by me, Will Ferrero. I'm an attorney at prior law right here in the Bronx, and we primarily practice in personal injury. However, we do also do a variety of areas of practice. So I can help you with just about any sort of legal issue that you might have. I'm admitted to practice both in New York and New Jersey. And if it's not something that I can personally help you with, I can connect you with someone in my network of attorneys who is best equipped to help you with your legal issue. You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at Bronx Attorney. You can send me an email, Ferrero@Prior Law, or call me at the office, 718-829-0222. And now back to the show. So has there been any unexpected challenges in transitioning from being just a lawyer to now, thinking about the business side of things as well?
There's absolutely been new frustrations that weren't there. So like anything, there's a learning curve to it. Part of it is the time management thing, because at least I think that the small, boots on the ground kind of stuff of making sure that a case moves, whether it's doing things like pushing discovery, whether I'm doing discovery myself or someone else is in the office drafting it, whether it's poking the other side, phone call after phone call to set up depositions, because as you know, they're not calling us into court all the time now. You
Right.
gotta almost bug people into moving forward with the case. The court's not holding our hand. So it's about how I spend my time, because I can spend a lot of time trying to pick up new cases and a lot of my energy trying to pick up new cases and build the relationships with new clients. But if I'm not moving my other cases, then it's not going to work out. And there's a huge lag between the work you put into your cases and most of the time, and when they actually turn into some sort of monetary value for you. Mm-hmm. So, if you take a 2, 3, 4 week break from pushing the cases on the ground level, then you're delaying, a reward, money verdict for 4 or 5 weeks. It's 1 and 1. And so it's about how I'm going to spend my time. And I think that's one of the newest frustrations I've seen.
Mm-hmm. And so do you have any, specific goals outlined for yourself or for your business, either short or long term?
Yeah, so it tends to be in the way we've been thinking about it in my office, and it might not be the most productive way to do it, but we think about it as we set a monetary goal. And I'm not going to exactly put what that number is, but we want to move from a gross settlement of X amount to a gross settlement of Y amount.
And per quarter or year or something
per quarter. We think about it per quarter, and again, we have an idea what that end of year number is, but per quarter kind of keeps us down to earth, because that keeps us focusing on cases that we think we can settle soon. Mm-hmm. So the last thing we want is a case sitting at the finish line, and all we got to do is make a couple calls and it'll eventually settle, or we got to get them to one IME and it'll settle. And
Right.
so if we're thinking about a short-term goal of a certain amount of money, we're looking at our cases and we're thinking, where can we make that money? And
Hmm.
we'll open up a case, we'll tear it apart, and we'll figure out, okay, well, you know, this this case is great liability. Our client does have a lot of emotional damages,
Hmm.
but she needs some professional to look at her and substantiate those. And if we push that, then in 5 or 6 weeks we'll have a report from a treating psychologist or psychiatrist, and then it looks like a totally new case for an insurance company, and then they'll be willing to settle. And it doesn't take a crazy amount of my time, but it does take action. I have to call. I have to. So those smaller goals, in a lot of ways, keep me focused on moving cases.
Hmm. And so, do you want to be more of a trial attorney, or do you want to be more of a office manager attorney? Do you have a preference?
I I want to be able to do both very well. Now, is there going to come a certain point where I'm going to have to pick one or the other? I think most of the time that's true. I mean, I've seen in other firms where someone is basically the office manager, a very experienced attorney, and if
Mhm.
they see a case that they really want to be engrossed in and they really think that this is the case where they could be helping, then they cherry pick the cases they want to work at. And I think that's a reasonable goal as the firm continues to grow.
Mhm.
I think that, you know, eventually I might move into a more managerial position, and I'm doing the mile high management of each case.
Mhm.
And then if there's a case that needs kind of direct focus, that's when I would put on a different hat and move into that sector, whether it be trial, whether it be a mediation, or just settlement discussions. Sort of laser focusing on where my skill set might be needed.
Is there anything in particular that you've been doing to try to become more knowledgeable about the business of law or managing a law firm, or are you just going trial by fire?
It's a combination. So first off, the internet is the most amazing thing ever,
Mm.
and it's full of a lot of BS, but also full of a lot of a great management uh, and even legal guidance, because we're not exactly the first people to do this,
Right.
and so everyone, and then at one point they were all doing trial by combat for this kind of stuff, but I try to take everything, see what works. There's a lot of nonsense you gotta just throw off the top, and there's no way. I've seen some people talk about how they've just hired a whole bunch of completely remote legal assistants who I couldn't even tell you exactly what they do, and I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that. I
Hmm.
like to understand exactly what's going on. I don't need to micromanage, but to outsource everything besides just the core legal stuff and not even know people, that seems like advice I couldn't follow. But at the same time, I think that making everything digital to the highest point possible, streamlining every process I could think of, using the best you know organization technology. That's something that the internet was just over and over and over again, and that's something to kind of pick up on.
Hmm. And how do you deal with being a young attorney? Because in this field, we're very much still in our infancy, and sometimes clients can get hesitant when they see that their attorney's only 29, 30 years old.
Yeah, that's a real thing. What I will say, and maybe you feel differently, it's very rarely the client who has uh, any doubts about the age situation. It tends to be the attorneys who have been practicing for 40 years, and they see a new attorney, and most of the 9 out of 10 are very nice, but it's that last one who doesn't want to hear anything. When I'm talking about the clients, most of them have never been in this situation or any situation at all, and so they want someone who first is willing to listen, and
Mhm.
that's huge points for anyone who's willing to listen, because I'm sure that plenty of other older attorneys who have been in this field for a long time, and it's probably not their fault. They've probably just after a while this field will you've heard it all, and so you may not give everything as much time as really needed. Uh, but most of the time, the clients are kind of, glued to me or you because we're a gold mine of information. They've never been through this process anymore, and they feel out of their element. So you could be whatever age you want, but if you're feeling out of your element, if you're this is something new, it could be something scary.
Mm.
They'll respect what you have to say. So I think that the clients, yeah, they'll see someone younger, and especially when I first came out of law school, they
Yeah.
would be like, "Oh, I'd have to tell them, otherwise they wouldn't know." Now they assume.
Yeah.
So it's gotten easier in that sense for sure. But they tend to respect the fact that you're listening and you have the information that can really
Right.
help
Right.
them.
Yeah. I had a couple clients a few years ago that they were
Mhm.
like, "You're a lawyer? Are you sure? You're pretty young." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, I'm sure." And then after the intake, they were like, "Okay, you know what you're talking about. I feel better now." I'm like,
Right. That's 80 or 90% of the battle. That they got to just feel confident in you,
yeah.
and that gets you there.
So then, how do you deal with the opposing counsel that may have been practicing in that jurisdiction for 40 years and tries to be a little bit of a bully with you?
Oh boy, I don't know if 100% there's an answer to that. Stick to your guns for sure. Uh, most of the time, or pretty much every time, it's not personal, and they take jabs at everyone,
Hmm.
and it's their attitudes towards the whole thing. And so, if you show them most of the time that you're just rolling with the punches and you're not pretending, people can
Yeah.
tell when you're pretending to know things. So that's never really worked for me. Just if you
Mhm.
don't know something, do your best at it. And people tend to respect that. But yeah, there's plenty of people out there, and they're in a vast minority. But they've been doing this forever, and even when the things change around them, they'll still insist that it's done a certain way.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I guess a lot's changing now with virtual court. You kind of evening the playing field with those older attorneys.
More than evening the playing field, because not only did we end up in a virtual court where everything's different, but they changed a lot of the local rules to adjust for that, and the way the conferences work, and the way the jury selection works, and so it's all a lot of it's new,
Right.
and so
Hmm.
it really evens it. They don't know, we don't know, but we know how to use the a lot of the Zoom functions a lot better.
Hmm. Hmm. Is there anything that sticks out from your legal career as some of your best successes so far?
Uh, what really sticks to me, and like I said, I do a lot of the employment discrimination cases,
Hmm.
and with those cases, you can really build a case that's normally a 5 or 6 in value. And if you're really putting the time, you can make it like a 9 or a 10. And with
Okay.
those cases, things tend to be extra personal. Someone lost their job because of discrimination or sexual harassment, or they were unlawfully, wrongfully terminated.
Hmm.
And so, you know, just like when people have physical injuries, their world collapses and they're left kind of emotionally scarred. And so you tend to, when you're helping a client and you're really putting the time, really get to know them. And so when you, whoever is working with them, or it's me or whatever it is, really pushes their case to the next tier where it should be, and a lot of firms won't put in the time to push it to the next tier. And the client doesn't always know that another attorney wanted to push it to the next tier, but when you do, you can see in the client the difference it makes in their lives. Because if you get
Hmm.
them an extra $70,000 because you spent a whole bunch of extra hours in the case, it makes a huge difference. That's really what sticks to me, because the stories in these cases are, uh, with a negative connotation, riveting in the sense that it's the kind of behavior and dramatics that you hope only exist on TV, but these people have been through a lot. So those are the kind of things that stick with you. And oftentimes, those aren't the cases that you argue on appeal and win. Those aren't the cases that you bring to trial. A lot of times, those are the cases that you make very strong in the beginning, and you get all the groundwork done, and they settle. And so there's no long story with it, where we worked for 4 years and then prevailed. It's that we worked for 8 months and prevailed early, so we didn't have to drag it out for the next 3 years. So that's kind of really what sticks.
Is there anything in particular that you do to increase it from that, B level case to an A level case for you?
Sure. So in those employment discrimination cases specifically, um, there's those two types of damages, right? Or broadly, there's the two types of damages. There's other damages that the court rarely awards, but they tend to be lost wages and emotional distress. Now, emotional distress is where you really have a lot of room to make a case stronger. A lot of times when these people are wrongfully terminated or sexually harassed at work or based on race harassed at work, there's a lot of emotional damage there. But
Mhm.
the only way that a judge or a jury or opposing counsel or insurance companies making these evaluations really take it seriously is if there's some sort of treatment with a mental health professional. So there's documentation. And then there's often needed a report, an analysis with diagnosis and shows
Mhm.
causation. So the emotional distress that person is suffering, we have a professional that's able to analyze and say, yeah, the emotional stress came from the employment issue
Mhm.
and not from just the other stressors of life.
Got it.
And so that's kind of the fungible. The part that you can really make a difference is if you put the time in. You can make a case from a class B to a class A,
Gotcha.
and it's often a tough subject to talk about with the clients because 8 out of 10 clients have never sought any sort of uh, mental health
Mhm.
counseling in their entire life. Which
Gotcha.
is why often you get to know these people a little more because they'll open up to you when you start suggesting it, and so that's a big part of increasing the value of your employment discrimination case.
Mhm. What would you say the most rewarding aspect of your job is?
Oh, if I could think of a specific thing, what
Or
comes to
generally?
mind? Yeah, generally, but what comes to mind is the look of relief when someone in the employment realm, at least,
Mhm.
when a case settles. And the only time I'm normally there for, because a lot of times it happens by phone, but in these mediations, all right, so we're sitting around a conference room and back and forth all day with numbers,
Mhm.
and the client's sitting there, and it could be a 7-hour process, and they've been
Right.
thinking about this lawsuit. It's been looming a little bit, and so when we kindly come to a great number that they're happy with, and we tell them, all right, we're done, congratulations, they're not expecting that kind of relief when they hear that, and so you can
Mhm.
like visibly see that kind of relief that now they can give themselves more of a permission not to think about this whole incident in the past.
Right, right,
So
right, right.
that's a big thing, and so you almost see, and it's not a cure, money never is, but you can see the stress kind of just leak out of them when they
Mhm.
hear that. So that's a nice little cherry on top.
Mhm. And so what kind of advice would you have to a young attorney who might be, in a position where they're working at a firm, they're kind of a cog in the machine, and they want to make a transition to either opening their own law firm or going to one where, they might have some more say and they might have to, they get some sort of ownership interest in return, and they're thinking about making that leap. What would you say to somebody in that position?
Of course. So first thing that comes to mind is that not every job on not every firm is going to have that opportunity. Uh, and someone could drive themselves crazy, you know, in a larger firm trying to make that opportunity exist. So if you're in a firm with 200 attorneys and you're trying to make it so that you're a partner in that firm, I don't know how far you're going to get. You might have to work your entire life to do that. And if you want it to happen sooner rather than later, you might have to go to a smaller firm. Because in a smaller firm, sort of what I was getting at earlier, you can make that big difference based on how you spend your time in the office. And so you get a little taste of it by working hard, doing the right things, pushing cases. And then, if the time is right and you feel like you created that leverage by,
Mhm.
being a huge part of that firm, you can approach, whoever your supervisor is or your boss is and kind of feel the water for that kind of thing. I mean, especially in smaller firms, there's no hard and fast rules. There's a lot less norms. So
Mhm.
if you're in a huge, white shoe firm, You're not exactly going to walk up to a partner as a junior associate and be like, "Hey, I think I'm ready to be a partner here." It's not going to work. They're going to be like, "All right, what's going on here?"
Either that or like, hey, I'm thinking about shaking some stuff up. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not gonna get you anywhere. So if you're at a smaller firm where things are more flexible, uh, and no one's gonna probably give you too much shit for trying to make things better most
Mm,
of the time. If you're at a healthy environment, if you're in a healthy environment, people want things to get better. People want to make more money, and so at the right place at a smaller firm, if you're trying to do it from the inside, and that's the way that I did it. I didn't start off with something brand new, which I'm sure is very, very tough, but I'm sure very doable. Uh, you got to just kind of take the leap and speak about it, which is a hard thing to do, but probably worth the
mm.
time.
And so when you were still an associate, did you approach the owner of the law firm and say, I'm thinking about changing up some processes or trying some new advertising schemes? Did you approach him with things like that?
Yeah, bit by bit. So luckily, the attorneys that I was working with were uh, sort of drawing it out of me in many ways.
Mhm.
And so once they started doing a little bit, that's when I took the steering wheel and I was like, hey, we need to try to change this and this. And, not everything stuck. There were certain
Right.
things that just didn't work because we didn't have the energy to put them in at that time, or we were extra busy at that time. And it's something that we should try when we're less busy, if that
Mhm.
ever happens. Or on the flip side, there were certain things that people just weren't ready to try. And it
Mhm.
would have taken a lot more effort for them to learn the process than me because
Right.
one, I probably created it. And two, people come from different backgrounds and it's not how people work. And, so there's no harm. There shouldn't be harm in a healthy environment, a healthy law firm, in bringing up what you think are positive changes and ban them around. It's kind of worth that risk and looking for that environment.
Mhm. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that we didn't touch on already?
Um, not a huge amount. One last thing that I want to just clear up, and when it comes to the employment stuff, and we get these calls all the time,
Mhm.
and this is like a main sticking thing, and this will help any attorney who's dealing in employment, have that memo that you can explain the law to, because the call we get over and over again is that the caller was wrongfully terminated.
Right.
And that term wrongfully terminated is kind of a loaded term because wrong, right and wrong, they're colloquially used. They're not a legal term.
Mhm.
And it's not the same thing as unlawfully terminated. Okay. So become good at explaining that to clients and
Mhm.
create shortcuts, because unless it's discrimination for a certain category, a mutable trait like race or a whistleblower, like you said, it might be wrong for them to fire an employee because they got mustard on their shirt and that boss just hates
Yeah, yeah,
mustard.
yeah.
But this crazy guy who hates mustard, but it's not illegal. It's wrong. It's not illegal.
Yeah.
Unfair is not illegal. Wrong is not illegal. And so that's kind of where I ended. Just make sure keep the mustard off the shirt.
Yeah, and I think that's good for any attorney to know so that, they can, if they're a real estate firm and one of their clients mentions something that happened, it's good to be able to sniff out a good case, right? And
Absolutely,
that way they can send them
absolutely.
over to you.
Right. We'll take care of them. We'll explain the law to them, and we'll take good care of everyone.
And so, if somebody is discriminated against or, if they're in an accident and for whatever reason they don't want to call me, where can they find you?
Oh, they can find me at topfloorandgittleman.com, or they can email me directly at joshua at ddtlaw.com. It's Delta Delta Tango law.com.
All right, Josh, thanks a lot. Nice talking to you.
Yep. Thanks. Have a good pod. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bronx Attorney Broadcast. Please like, review, and subscribe so we can help the channel continue to grow. And if you're interested in connecting with any of the guests, please let me know, and I'd be happy to make the introduction.